Welcome, everyone. My name is Asati Nu, and I am the founder of the National Black Liberation Alliance.
My name is Lorraine Gainey, and I'm an acting board member of NBLA.
My name is Beverly White. I too serve as an acting board member of NBLA. We are so grateful to have you join us this evening.
Tonight's panel discussion is for parents who are desperately seeking alternative routes for educating their children this coming school year.
If you are a parent or an educator like myself, I'm sure you are feeling anxious about sending your scholars into the classroom.
With a mission to assist in creating positive change within the Black communities, and really within all communities, we saw a need and a means to help parents like many of you.
Our goal with this panel of wonderful educators is to provide you with the resources and options that leave you feeling empowered to make the best decision for your family.
There truly are other options to providing your family with a safe and healthy learning environment, because it is possible for all of us.
We have the wherewithal to create an enriching and wonder-filled learning environment for our scholars, no matter what our economic statuses may be. Our hope is to give you the resources to do just that.
At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this evening. Dr. Adrian Johnson is an experienced educational leader who has taught K-12 students in the area of special education for over 34 years. She has earned numerous degrees, which include bachelor's and master's degrees in special education and a Doctor of Education degree in ethical leadership. As a recently retired teacher, Dr. Johnson currently provides private virtual tutoring services to students in the Atlanta area who have been impacted by the school closures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Johnson's international experience reaches West Africa, where she served as an education team co-leader for the NFP Johnson Assignment Global Initiative. Dr. Johnson declares that her greatest accomplishment is being in a happy covenant marriage to her best friend for the past 38 years. She is a proud mother of 3 adult children and lives to spoil her grandchildren. Please welcome Dr. Adrian Johnson.
Well, we are very pleased to have with us tonight 4 leading experts in the field of homeschooling. I would like to begin this program right now by introducing our panelists. Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman is a homeschooler based in Maryland and co-founder of the Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars, co-editor of the forthcoming book, Homeschooling Black Children in the United States, an examination of homeschooling in practice, theory, and popular culture. Her expertise as a scholar and homeschool practitioner has been commissioned by the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center, showcased at Impact Hub, Baltimore, and also highlighted in her brands, Student Media Online and So Our Youth Aspire. Also with us tonight is Dr. Joyce Burgess. Dr. Burgess is a veteran homeschooler, homeschooling mother for nearly 30 years. She's a CEO and co-founder, along with her husband Eric, of the National Black Home Educators, an organization that empowers parents to educate their children to excellence. She is also the author of 3 books, Teach Me How to Teach My Child, A Gentlewoman's Guide to Greatness, and A Home Educator's Guide to Greatness. Also with us tonight, we have Dr. Cheryl Fields-Smith. Dr. Fields-Smith is an associate professor of elementary education in the College of Education at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. She has earned her doctorate from Emory University in 2004. Her research interests include family engagement and homeschooling among Black families. Dr. Fields-Smith's most recent publications is titled Exploring Single Black Mothers' Resistance Through Homeschooling, which details the lives of single mothers who homeschool while not working full-time. Her work has been featured in many multimedia reports, including NBC News, PBS NewsHour, and The Atlantic. Dr. Fields-Smith is a former elementary school teacher in Connecticut, where she taught first, second, and fourth grades. We also have with us tonight Monica Oliveira. She's a freelance education writer. She's an author and homeschooling mom. Her website, mommymaestra.com, helps Hispanic parents get more involved in their children's education by providing resources, tips, and opportunities. She has written several education books also, including The Latino Family's Guide to Homeschooling and Preschool at Home, a guide for caregivers. Her education articles have also appeared in numerous online sites, such as NBC News, latinamom.me, and PBS Parents. A more extensive look at our panelists' biographies can be found on our Facebook page. So I'd like to welcome you all, panelists, once again, and we're so glad that you could all be with us tonight. And to our Facebook Live, or now Zoom Live audience, we'd like to welcome you too. If you have questions for our panel, please send them in the chat, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. Now at this time, I'll ask each of the members of the panel to do two things. First, I'd like for you to give a brief background of why you chose homeschooling and how did you decide to be a part of this panel discussion. Let's begin with Ms. Oliveira.
Thank you, Adrienne. So we decided we would go ahead and start homeschooling when my daughter was getting ready to enter kindergarten. We lived in North Carolina at the time in a very small rural community, and the state, actually it was a failed school district, and so the state had come in and closed down one school and they had taken over the other. And education was something that was just really, really important to us. So although I had no plans to homeschool, we decided that that was the best route because there was a lot of other homeschoolers in the area, so I had a lot of encouragement and support. So when Asati asked me if I would come and join the panel, I said yes, because I've had a lot of people that have been reaching out to me and messaging me, asking me, how do I get started? And I think that a lot of parents are feeling a lot of stress and pressure right now. And so my goal was
Okay. Go ahead, Monica. You can continue. So your goal?
So my goal was to just help parents get more involved in homeschooling or help get them get started with it. I think that we need to not be afraid of it, and I think a lot of the fear itself is stopping a lot of parents from doing it, and by helping them with resources, that can make them feel a little bit more comfortable and secure about doing so.
Absolutely. All right, thank you so much. Dr. Burgess. So the two questions, Dr. Burgess, is give a brief background of why you chose homeschooling and how did you decide to be a part of this particular panel?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Some years ago, probably almost 35 years ago, we received a notice from our son, who was in high school at the time, from his school that he had fallen 2 points below their acceptable grade level. Their GPA for entrance to the school was 3.0. He had fallen 2 points, like 2.8. So based upon that, they gave us a couple of choices that they would retain him, or that we had to transfer him to a school way across town. And of course, neither of those decisions was something that we wanted to do. So we contacted some friends of ours who we knew had a homeschool association in our local city. And they told us we can start homeschooling the next day. And so we did. Our son was 13 at the time. So he's 44 years old now. So it's been a wonderful journey. And, you know, we always want to put homeschooling in the best possible light, because as more and more parents see that Black families are homeschooling, then they won't be so afraid to venture out and do the same thing for their children. The reason I wanted to be a part of this panel tonight was homeschooling is a great thing. It's effective, it works. It's been working for the last 50-some, well, probably almost 30 or to 50-some years. And we always want to put homeschooling in the best possible light so that parents will know that this is something that they can do, it applies to them, and they can be successful at homeschooling.
Okay, very good. Dr. Ali-Coleman.
Good evening, everybody. So my journey as a homeschooling parent is an interesting one. I actually come from a long line of educators, but my daughter is currently, she's a 16-year-old dual enrolled homeschooler, which means that she currently is being homeschooled for high school, but she's also a community college student. And I've homeschooled her off and on for the past 12 years. And like Dr. Burgess said, I looked at homeschooling as a viable option always, because as she shared, I believe as Black people, our history has shown that we've been very resilient and innovative when it's come to education, and it's always started in the home, I believe. I also like to say, Dr. Burgess, I'm around the same age as your son, and you look like you look younger than me, but that's an aside. But homeschooling, I'm in Maryland. I'm based in Maryland, and we have neighborhood schools, schools that a child must attend based on where you're located. You can apply for a transfer, and we have a very archaic magnet program system. And if anyone is familiar with magnet programs, they came about really to desegregate schools, but to offer options to white families in order to entice them to attend school with Black children during desegregation. And so I ironically live in a predominantly Black county in Maryland where magnet schools still exist. And to attend magnet schools, a lottery is enacted, which really when you always talk about crabs in a barrel, it's really a pattern to get your child in a specialty school, although we know that there are certain best practices when teaching children. So some of the specialty schools range from Montessori to language immersion, all of these things that all parents would want their children to be able to engage in. And unfortunately, that's not an option unless you're the chosen one to get in these types of school. My daughter actually was a quote unquote chosen one for middle school and was able to be part of a performing arts school for 2 years. However, her experiences, which I've been able to capture from her since high school. I learned new things every day about this middle school experience, but really this understanding that a lot of things that were in place, this idea that you're in this arts environment, still was trumped by the fact that she had many experiences encountering adultism, even though a predominantly Black school, not really being engaged in curriculum that was culturally relevant or culturally interdisciplinary, I would say. So she actually asked me after middle school to resume homeschooling, as I had done earlier before she returned to public school for middle school. And so in addition to being a homeschooling mother, I'm also I recently earned my doctoral degree in higher education with emphasis on community college leadership. And I was able to do research on African-American dual-enrolled homeschool students to really be able, inspired by the work of my colleague, Dr. Cheryl Fields-Smith, who is the most prolific researcher on homeschooling Black families. And so that was very long, and you didn't ask for all that, but that's really, that is my journey, but also as a homeschooling parent, but also as a researcher.
Okay, and that's fine. You know, we'll get into a whole lot more of that, I'm sure, throughout, but it's very impressive. Thank you so much. Dr. Fields-Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So in full disclosure, I have never homeschooled my children. However, I was never a parent that relied exclusively on the public school to educate my child, even when I was a teacher serving in the school that they attended. I still didn't rely on my colleague down the hall to do everything that needed to be done. So that is one reason that I chose homeschooling as a research agenda, is I can identify with parents who have chosen not to use public schools, because for decades we have not served all Black children well, Latino children either, for that matter. And so I could immediately identify with the voices of Black home educators, really actually not, the lived experience says a lot more than any of the statistics could ever say. When you start to hear the stories of people who have been in public schools, charter schools, they've been in private schools, religious schools, and the horrific experiences that they've had in these places, it needs to be told. It's a very authentic vehicle for constructive criticism for these schools, these places that are supposed to be educating our children. And so that's one of the reasons that I have chosen to be committed to a research agenda on Black homeschooling. I think it speaks a lot to our history. It's a returning to our roots, because most people that homeschool, it is a collective. It is a each one reach one, each one teach one. Those old adages that we grew up with, it's the embodiment of those. And tonight I wanted to be a part of this panel because this country is in a predicament. And I've had white colleagues contacting me for information on how to set up a learning pod, how to, now they want to know, what I'm about my research. And if I can do that for white folks, I need to really be able to do it for my own. And so every opportunity I have to do something, to share what I know, I am more than happy to do that. So.
And we have a question that's going to relate to the homeschool pods in a little bit. So just put a pin in that and we'll get back to that. But don't go anywhere, Dr. Burgess, because you have the very first question tonight. So the question is, how and why is homeschooling a viable option for families during the pandemic, especially for children of color? And I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit.
Well, definitely. First thing I want to say is, for those who have lost loved ones during this epidemic, our hearts and prayers are with you. But homeschooling is safe. It's a protective environment. It gives parents an opportunity to control or to monitor the curriculum or the education that their children are receiving. It's flexible. Homeschoolers are always sought out from colleges because of their high test scores. And homeschooling is a face-to-face environment. I remember homeschooling my 5 children, and all of them learn differently. So I had to learn teach myself how to teach different children and different age levels. So it's very viable in that parents are solely involved. They are connected. They know what their children are learning. It gives them an opportunity to pass their family values on. It gives parents an opportunity to see that their children require patience and they require time. And every child is different. So every curriculum, all of the curriculum must be tailored, must be customized to fit the specific needs of the child. So those are some of the viabilities of homeschooling. It just works. After 35 years of homeschooling, you know, those 5 children are homeschooling their children. We are now, as a family, in the 3rd generation. I'm seeing my great-grandchildren being homeschooled. So it is a legacy. It's a pouring into. It can help build and strengthen families, which is what is so needed today. And I know you all agree with that.
Yes, we do. Oh, my goodness. Yes, we do. Thank you for that. Ms. Oliveira, how has homeschooling grown and why has it become so popular over the past 20 or more years? Yes, Ms. Oliveira? She may be having some technical difficulties.
I don't see her.
Okay. Is there anyone else on the panel who can answer that? The question was, how has homeschooling grown and why has it become so popular over the past 20 years or so?
I can do that.
Okay.
Well, homeschooling, of course, has grown over the last 30 some odd years. Actually, African Americans make up about, I would say, 20% of the maybe nearly 3 million homeschoolers that are out there. And some of the reasons are, you know, even doctors nowadays are telling their parents that they may want to consider homeschooling their children. And the reason being is because some children just require that one-on-one. There may be special needs. It may be, you know, that a child just, you know, need, especially African-American boys who are so labeled, they just need that one-on-one attention. So those are some of the reasons that it's grown over the years. And as more and more African-Americans are being successful at homeschooling, young parents, this millennial generation, you know, that very kind of agrarian generation, they're just going to do something organic. And there's nothing more organic than a parent sitting down teaching their own children.
Okay, very good.
I think Dr. Fields-Smith also was trying to answer that question too.
Okay, go right ahead.
I mean, the only thing I could add too is that as every single person that I've interviewed that homeschooled, they knew someone that was homeschooling and they talked about how their families really gave them a hard time initially. But I think we've gotten over that as we see the success that Black homeschool children are having, the ability to think beyond imagination, be creative, in their interests, and be successful in the world has enabled us to look beyond what we used to think of public school as our uplift. What's really our uplift is education. And when you're not getting it in the institution, you just have to come to realize, well, how long are we going to wait? How many generations have to suffer before we go and do what we need to do? And that, you know, so as we have that mindset now, you're going to see more and more and more, increasingly, I think.
I also think that the reasons why we're seeing an increase now is slightly different than the reasons why pre-COVID. I think it's a pre-COVID and post-COVID reasoning that's kind of happening. I know from having to do the research, to do the literature review, the review of what already existed before I conducted my own research. That's called a literature review. I know that many previous scholars had found that the reason why parents were choosing to homeschool, a lot of times revolved around racism occurring in the schools. Also, their own previous experiences with school systems, everything from being underestimated as a student, not having access to certain opportunities, many of the things that Dr. Burgess said as well, in terms of it just not being an environment that inspired the possibilities of being successful. One of the things that in a previous teaching that Dr. Fields-Smith and I had this past July, I was privileged to interview Queen Thais, who has a very robust homeschooling community through her Liberated Minds brand. And in interviewing her, she said that homeschooling allowed her to focus on stages, not ages. And so homeschooling allowed, a lot of parents are realizing that with public schooling or traditional schooling, whether it's public, private, or charter, we are kind of ingrained to believe that certain skills and certain academic disciplines are to occur at certain times, whereas with homeschooling, you really can adjust and respond naturally to the learning styles and the learning needs of your child. And I found that in my research as well, when children were telling me what their indicators of preparedness for community college were. They ranged the gamut, but what was consistent was that when they were homeschooled, they had the ability to learn at their own pace, to accelerate when necessary, to focus longer on subjects that may have been a bit challenging. And that ability to really self-direct and self-advise at times are the very skills that we expect college students to have. And therefore, when they were then integrated into a college setting, it was natural for them because those skills were respected and were promoted during their homeschooling experience.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. So we know that there's been a recent surge in homeschooling, in particular co-ops. There's been a lot of questions about co-ops, even more since the onset of COVID-19 pandemic. Let's see, who am I going to? Dr. Fields-Smith, can you explain what are homeschooling co-ops and ways to start your own?
Okay, so for my understanding of what a co-op would be is you get a group of parents together who are, I would imagine, would have to be very like-minded in terms of their ideas and beliefs regarding children and how to teach them. And so if I'm really strong in math and you're really strong in reading and you can contribute art, then we pool our resources together and develop a place where our kids can come together and learn together, each parent actually contributing to teach all of the children. And they can take all kinds of formats. They don't have to be an everyday thing. Some people will say, okay, our co-op is going to meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday only. But the key here is the parents are teaching each other's children based on their strengths and what they feel they can contribute. So instead of being the traditional model of teaching your own child at your kitchen table, for example, there's a place in the co-op for you to come together. Something that I'm not clear on, what is the difference between a co-op, a homeschool co-op, and a learning pod? This is new language that's come into the scene. And is there anyone on the panel that could help me understand the difference?
There is no difference, really.
Okay.
It's really the same. And I think how you describe the co-op as the parents teaching each other's children has really evolved over the years. I know I've participated in a couple of co-ops, and and all three of them, I'm in Maryland, but I'm in the Washington D.C. area. There are two co-ops I like to mention, Sankofa Homeschooling Co-op, primarily because it's one of the most, they've gotten a lot of media attention, so you can actually Google them, but they now offer virtual homeschooling options for children because of this. One of the co-founders told me in an interview that they were intending on doing that, but now with COVID, it was necessary. Yeah. But they've really evolved where it did start exactly like you said, Cheryl, where it was parents. And then it's evolved to now they bring in, it may be a parent, but it also may be a contractor. So someone who was formerly a teacher like you, or someone who has a consulting business like Dr. Johnson, someone coming in and teaching. I know when my daughter participated years ago when she was in elementary school in their co-op, she took a poetry class from Baba Josh. She took an African history class. She took an art class where they did art using papyrus and learn about Egyptian art. So all of these things were taught by either a parent of children that were in the co-op or a teacher or some type of person who has been vetted to teach these. And it's the exact same idea behind these learning pods or pandemic pods. But I think the language is new because with pandemic and learning pods, the people who are at the forefront of organizing these are the people who are homeschooling because of COVID or really getting together their task force in preparation for virtual learning because of the closure of schools.
And you both are exactly right. Fundamentally, we look at 30 some years ago, it was support groups when we would get together for specified field trips, and then it went from support groups to co-ops. Like you said, we get together and we teach and parents teach. I'm a singer, so I taught music. And another thing I like about co-ops and pods is you have an opportunity to teach the domestic things like flower pressing and cooking and sewing. And so now it's learning pods. So, we're just elevating, and that's the beauty of homeschooling. We're putting it in its best possible light because it can be successful. And one of the great things about homeschooling, parent-directed education, parental involvement, is parents are at the helm. I think about what Carter G. Woodson said. He said African Americans are, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he said African Americans are the only people group who will give their children over, give our national treasures over when they should be housed within our bosom so that we can teach them who we are, teach them our family values, because that's how the legacy, that's how we build our empires, that's how we build our kingdoms as families.
Wow. Well, Dr. Burgess, stay right there because the next question is definitely for you. How can individuals find pre-existing co-ops even across the country?
Oh, wow. Of course, the young lady just shared about some co-ops in Washington, D.C. But basically, you just do a Google check. And Google will lead you to just about every co-op across the country. The National Black Home Educators, NBHE, we also have co-ops across the country. About 20 years ago, we started our first co-op here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But there are so many co-ops. We have Facebook co-ops. Across the country, we have private groups. I just started a Facebook social co-op. It's called Parents as Teachers at Home. I encourage you to go and like that page, Parents as Teachers at Home. And so just do a Google check. You can go to the National Black Home Educators website, nbhe.net. It gives you a whole list of how to start a co-op. And, we were so fortunate and so blessed about 2 years ago to be a part of Google G Suite for Education. The National Black Home Educators was chosen to issue G Suite codes to any domain who wants to start a co-op, or who wanted to start, or who wanted to get the G Suite for education, which just opens up a whole new world of learning, curriculum, information, so that parents, to help strengthen parents in their choice to homeschool their children.
Wow, that's amazing. So, Ms. Oliveira still with us? I think she was having some technical difficulties. Well, maybe someone else on the panel can answer this question. What are ways that smaller groups can come together to support our children? Even organizations, different organizations, how can they come together to support our children?
Are you talking
I think Cheryl and I we represent a smaller group. We actually came together in April of this year. We are co-editing a forthcoming book together, but we decided with our background in research on Black homeschooling families to really put our heads together to find ways to support our Black homeschooling communities. And an example of some of the things that we've done, in addition to the book that's coming out and giving voice, our book is going to feature the voices of not only researchers and academics, but also homeschooling families. We also wanted to provide space. So this past July, we had a teach-in, and a teach-in as opposed to a conference, because teach-ins, the idea behind a teach-in is that learning is taking place, that it's not only academic or scholarly in nature, but it also is inclusive of the many voices around a particular issue. Teach-ins came about during the Vietnam War. So that was something that we did in July, and we have a Tea Talk series that we're beginning actually this month as well. So organizations can really draw from what it is that they offer the public in general and specialize that information in bite-sized ways to offer, whether it's a service for cost or free, to families. What a lot of families who are homeschooling because of the pandemic are seeking are just a lot of those basics on how to get started. What are the possibilities, to have examples of what are things that have pre-existed, so that they can really use that as a launch pad to envision what they need themselves. During our teaching, we had homeschooling families share their journeys from everything from what is the learning style of your child, to really being flexible enough to understanding that homeschooling also is a part of your parenting journey. So what are those things as a parent that you need to really reflect on and adjust to be able to educate optimally?
Okay, very good. Let's see, Dr. Fields-Smith, if you can tell us, if parents were interested in getting started with homeschooling, what are the basic requirements to homeschool your scholars?
Wow, that varies by state.
Okay.
Each state has its own laws, and some have more oversight from the government than others. So I can't tell you the law specifically. It depends on where you are.
Yes.
But more intrinsically, I don't think you have to do school the way you were schooled. I think that's the first thing one of the first things you need to think about.
Yeah.
And there is fear, and I can really empathize with that. You know, when you take the reins of your child's education and there's fear, you know, I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to mess up my child. Mm-hmm. But I think I think we have to get home educators that are beginning to reframe that. And it was a big hot theme in our teach-in last month, and thinking about, you are your child's first teacher. You've been there from birth. There is nobody on this planet that knows your child better than you.
Absolutely.
And you have to draw from that strength as a mom or a dad, as a family first. And don't try to do school at home, because sometimes this thing called school is the problem. So don't try to replicate that. Okay. I think to get started, you just take a deep breath, do some deep breathing, and think about your child. How does your child learn best? What is your child interested in? You can, if you want to, go on your state's standards.
Yes.
And you can see what a child in your son or daughter's age group would be learning if they were in school. But let me tell you this from the research. Every parent I talked to, and my first study had 46 parents.
Okay.
Every parent I talked to said that those standards were much lower than what they were doing.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And let me tell you, as a teacher of teachers, I currently teach teachers too. I tell them and try to stress with them, those standards represent the bare minimum. If you look at second grade social studies standards for Georgia, they learn there's 6 historical figures. And I always say to my teachers, didn't you learn more than 6 historical figures? Well, why would you stick to just 6?
Right.
And the answer today is because those are the 6 that are going to be on the test. And that's what's messed up our school system. And so I don't blame you, because the teachers have so much pressure to do that. But you don't have that pressure.
Right.
You teach as many if you have like my son loved history. If I only taught 6 historical figures, I'd be in trouble with him. I didn't rely on the school. I had to take my son different places, get books, and I learned through him. So that's the other thing. Mm-hmm. Please be willing to learn with your child. Don't think you have to know everything. Yes. That would be very important. Even as a teacher, we don't know everything in that curriculum. So be willing to learn.
Yes. Flexibility. Flexibility is.
Yes. And I think you have, you can get even more ideas from your actual home educator. So I'm going to be quiet.
No, what you said was great. You really hit the nail on the head. It's interesting and it's ironic. I live in a small community outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I actually serve on our local school board. And we have probably less than 1,200 children in our schools. And, when I was running for school board, people asked me, well, you're a homeschool mom. Why do you want to serve on a local school board? And I say, because I'm a homeschool mom gives me credibility to serve on this school board, because I can speak from a teacher's perspective, from a principal and staff perspective. I can also I can empathize with the child and, of course, the parent. So everything you said, Dr. Fields, was very, very true. It just shouted from the rooftop. I remember when I first started homeschooling, I had the chalkboard and the desk, which totally overwhelmed me. And we did that for a couple of years. But after a while, it's to the kitchen table or it's into the kids' bedrooms across their bed. And, just set a vision, set a schedule of what you want your children to learn. And all of those historical figures, they can learn all of that. I did go to our state's website and download some of those requirements. But like you said, it's not enough. Our children can go farther than that. They can go so much farther. And, those are the things that we do. All of my children entered college at the age of 16 because, I'm going to say this, and Dr. Fields, don't jump at me, but I feel like this. If my child is doing very well in 2nd grade, hey, let's just skip 3rd grade and go to 4th grade. You know what I'm saying? Let's just do that. And we actually did that with some of our children because, every child is different, and we have to recognize that curriculum and our relationships with our children, they have to be different. It's not a one size fits all. It's what is best for that particular child.
Yes. Very good.
I wanted to say that confidence, because I pulled that from what both of them were saying, is that that's the biggest thing that families that have mothers that I've been talking to, it's a really big confidence issue in terms of feeling confident, particularly people that did not choose that. And that's what the difference is that we're seeing with COVID, is that there are so many people that are homeschooling, deciding to homeschool now, but it's not a choice that was made in a way outside of a global pandemic. So this is an entirely new situation where the confidence levels are very low because many parents are feeling like they're being thrown into this. And what I would really encourage people to really do is to, and I actually have a video about it and everything, but about establishing a mission statement, because it's a reflective exercise to understand what are your goals that you have. There's an educator by the name, he's just recently passed, his name is Ajay Akoto, and he was an educator at the forefront of Black liberation schools that really sprouted up during the 70s. And I attended his Pan-African school, Nation House Watoto, during the early 80s in Washington, D.C. But I recently came across a video when Queen Thais shared it on her page where he was speaking. And one of the things that he said is that the education system, or education in general, is like the reproductive womb of a society. So what comes out of the educational system feeds into or is born into a society, or the society is what embraces what is born from this educational system. He said, but from the womb of an antelope, you wouldn't expect, or the womb of an elephant, you wouldn't expect an antelope to blossom. And so a lot of times we are putting our children in this educational system that is not for them in most regards, to enter a world where spaces are institutionally is not aligned with who they are culturally. And so homeschooling really allows you to establish what that mission is that you have for your child, that is a vision that is not necessarily always part of the school system's plan for your children. And it sounds very politicized and it sounds really conspiratorial, but the reality is if we look historically, all of the opportunities that we we have for our children, a lot of times they are a vision to have them integrate into a society that is not necessarily for them, where homeschool allows you to try to build them so they are creators of the society that we wish to see.
Yes. Now, Dr. Fields-Smith, your book, Exploring Single Black Mothers' Resistance Through Homeschooling, details single Black mothers who homeschool while not working full-time.
Right.
What can you say to single parents who feel homeschooling is out of their reach?
Well, I think, let me, again, in full disclosure, it's my first book, and out of 46 parents that I interviewed, I chose these 4 single Black mothers. I am a single Black mother as well. So I really identified with them. And when you listen to their stories, only one of them would be what we would call a first choice home educator. She homeschooled her children from birth. But the other 3 that I put in the book, there were circumstances in their lives that pushed them, I think would be a good word, pushed them towards homeschooling, and then they took off from there. So much so that they continued to not work full time. I would say you rely on your village. We it used to be easier when we all lived in the same community.
Yes.
But we don't. Now we're stretched. But as a single parent, you have to have a village of people who are there to support you, depending on your laws in your state. So, for example, here in Georgia, if you are a single parent and you wish to homeschool, you can hire someone to do some of that homeschooling while you're at work, for example. I met mothers who were homeschooling groups of children, moms who were paying this particular mom, who was a former public school teacher,
Yes.
to educate their children. And so she had a homeschool school, if you will. But down the road, if you live in North Carolina, the law there says you can only homeschool one person outside of your family. So you really, it's much harder there, I would say, to be able to do that, right? So it depends on your laws, depends on your village, if you will. Mm-hmm. One of the homeschool moms here was a full-time student who had 2 children, and she chose to homeschool one of them. And the way she set it up was that she would have her classes, say, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then on those days when she was in class, her child would go to friends who had a business. And so entrepreneurship became part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So that child would spend those 2 days learning how to do inventory, advertising, how to run a business.
Yes.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when mom was home and studying, she was also teaching her child. Yeah. So, you make it work. That I love that saying. I grew up with that saying, where there's a will, there's a way. Yes. You have to think outside of the box and make it happen. One mom would, her children had gotten to the point where some were old enough to be home alone. Mm-hmm. And so at night, she would sit with elderly people for a part-time job. And she was able to sleep too, because you don't have to, you just have to be there in the house with the person, and then go home in the morning and teach her children. Mm-hmm. And so she, all of them had hustles, those side hustles, but they weren't full-time work. It was not, punching a clock or anything like that. Now, there are some moms out there who are maintaining intense careers, like professor, for example, and they are still homeschooling their children. They're finding ways to do it. Part of that depends on the flexibility of your job, depends on the village. Who can you rely on to help you with this? The laws in your state. But there are resources out there to help you. If you join a co-op, who says school has to be Monday through Friday, 7 to 3?
Right.
Perhaps the class you offer in the co-op is around your work hours. Maybe it's on the weekend, but you can still contribute to a co-op while your child is also benefiting from the other parts of the co-op while you're doing a job. So you just have to think outside of the box. I think the saying that homeschooling is a lifestyle, it is a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. It is very different from the traditional school model. So I just remember, don't try to put that on this. This isn't that traditional model. There's a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more creativity. If your child I had one parent in the bigger study. The child was really into horses, wanted to be a barrel racer. Okay, I was like, well, what is a barrel racer? I have no idea what that is. It is a particular event in a rodeo. You can become a professional barrel racer. So part of her homeschooling day, she spent volunteering with an equestrian stable where they did therapy during the day with kids. And so she helped with that. And she also, cleaned the muck out of the stalls sometimes. And in exchange for that, she got riding time and riding lessons to perfect her ability to become a barrel racer. So you have to think outside the box here.
Absolutely.
It is a great opportunity to be creative. Many homeschool moms and Dr. Fields just hit on everything with single moms. But, I know some single moms who have their business within their home, like a makeup business or a catering service or, like you said, an equestrian business. Mm-hmm. So you just have to think outside the box. And with that support of your family, some single parents, I even knew a single dad who homeschooled. and his parents taught his children during the day while he was working.
Wow.
So it's an opportunity to just really stretch yourself and be creative. And we're here, you know, we're the veterans homeschoolers, so we're here for homeschool moms who are single. We're here for you. Please ask your questions, and we will try to get you in touch with people. I think about Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA. They actually have perhaps some funding that's available to single moms with their homeschool foundation, and just reach out to them for some help as well.
Well, at this time, I'm going to ask if the people who are in our Zoom guests, let me put it that way, if you could begin to send in your questions. We'll start the Q&A in just a few, but this will give you time to just kind of formulate your ideas, your thoughts, and put them in the chat, and we'll begin to address those. Okay, while you're doing that, in the meantime, I think we have Miss Oliveira back. Yes, no? There you are.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good.
I know
Okay.
you have technical glitches. This question is for you. How can you homeschool a child with learning differences? Have you found that in your tenure as a homeschooler?
I'm probably not the best choice for that answer, but I will do my best. And I do know that there are a lot of homeschoolers who actually choose to homeschool because the child has a learning difference. And so that what they do is they are looking for ways to give more attention or to teach in the style that their child learns best, which a lot of times they cannot receive in the school setting because, you know, they're trying to go as fast or as you know, they can in the classroom. But, you know, when you're homeschooling, you're able to modify your entire curriculum. You're able to choose a curriculum that is best suited to a child with special needs or learning differences. I know that a lot of times it's easier for you to not only adapt, but also find the services that you need to get your child the help that they need, that a lot of times it's a struggle to get through the school system.
Yeah.
So I think when you have that opportunity to do it yourself, a lot of times parents have more passion to make sure that their child will learn correctly and in a way that they will learn quickly or best, rather than, you know, in a school setting, because when you homeschool, you can go as fast or as slow as you need to for your child to master the concept. Right.
Yeah.
So that's one. And there are a lot of resources and especially homeschool materials now that are available that, I mean, I think the market of materials and curricula that are available are just exploding right now. And they have been for the last couple of years. So it's easier for parents to find the materials that they need to homeschool children, for example, with dyslexia, or like actually my son does struggle with dysgraphia. And so we have to consistently look for the materials or the right curriculum that will help him succeed with writing and spelling. Right.
Very good. All right. Well, I'm glad you're back because you added a lot of insight. Let's see. So I know, Dr. Burgess, I heard you mention something about funding. Is there grant funding available for homeschooling?
If you are a nonprofit organization or some kind of entity, there is probably private funding for those organizations, or there may be grants. Okay. I know that there's probably not government funding for homeschool families, but, you know, as an organization, the National Black Home Educators, we do receive grants, we do receive private funding, we do receive donations. But for homeschoolers, and then you also have to check with your state as well. In our state, Louisiana, we have a tax exemption for homeschool families, a tax credit, so to speak, for homeschool families. But there's, I wouldn't venture out to say that there's any, don't know of any funding for homeschool families unless you are a part of an organization.
Okay. All right. And so anyone can answer this question on the panel. What resources and materials are available for a culturally based curriculum? Or is that something where you go and, research supplemental materials, or how do you go about focusing in if you're an African American family or Hispanic family or Asian American family to get curriculum that's culturally based?
Well, I've created supplemental materials, and the reason I say supplemental is because sometimes as a homeschool mom, you just don't know what to teach. You see the information that's out there, and sometimes it's biased. You really don't get a good feeling about it. So what I ended up doing, I created supplements, and those supplements are available at JoyceMBurgess.com. Also, a lady by the name of Kathy Trusty, she has curriculum called Teach Black History, beautifully designed curriculum for teaching about African-American culture, African-American heroes. My family is diverse. My children are married to Caucasians, they're married to Filipinos, and so I have to really just spread myself out into just kind of a whole venture of curriculum, basically. And so having said that, I do believe that, the National Black Home Educators, our target is African Americans, but we're not exclusive. We believe that children need a well-rounded experience of education. And so I had to just create African American content that I knew was not biased, that I knew where they wouldn't just learn about the 6 historical people, but they learned about a well-rounded, a huge list of African-American heroes. You can also get free resources at abcteacheducation.com. Afri Classical, we think about Mozart, we think about Bach, we think about Beethoven, but those were not the only classical composers of the 17th and 18th century. If you go to a website called AFRI, A-F-R-I classical.com, you will see African-American composers. And it's just a beautiful thing to hear. There's samples of their music there. It's a whole curriculum where you can study. And if you go to www.nbhe.net, I encourage people to join our organization. You get a personal login information where you actually have music that children can listen to during the morning hours, the music that will really sync with the brain to teach them those subjects like math and reading. And then we have an afternoon buffet of music that parents can listen to that will also be creative enough and kind of uplifting, like Haydn's Water Suites for teaching children in the afternoon. And then we also have a nighttime where you want to calm children down, maybe let them listen to some real good books on tape, something like that. And we have music that goes with that from morning, afternoon, and in the evening time. So I think I've given you some information, and I do want to plug this in, that if you're interested in a Google G Suite for Education code, right now Google has just unleashed their G Suite for Education to where you go to Google and you type in G Suite for Education. If you are a domain, they will issue you a code and you have access to that entire warehouse of the Google G Suite for Education platform.
Okay. Well, you are a wealth of information. Thank you so much. We're going to try to get those in our on our page here so that people can.
I'll type it in for you.
Okay. And they can have access in the chat and on the page as well. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We're going to switch gears just a little bit now and go ahead and ask some of the questions that our audience wants to know. First question, and any panel member can answer this. How can families set up e-learning spaces in their homes? What items should they have?
So my daughter is currently in high school, and as I mentioned before, she is also dual enrolled in community college. And so e-learning essentially is utilizing the computer for a large portion of your education. For many students who are still connected to the traditional school, public charter, and private schools, the computer is how you're still staying in touch with your teachers. So the first and foremost is making sure that you have that reliable internet source. There are libraries in many places now that are offering very innovative practices, I think, in terms of offering mobile hotspots for families that may not have access to internet. Everything from being able to drive into their parking lot and utilize the internet, smaller spaces that allow only a few people you can come in and utilize, but definitely that reliable internet access. And I would also say compatible hardware. So having computers that are not necessarily you're able to just get on social media or things like that, but have enough memory to allow children to engage in different types of programming. I can tell you that coding, if they're allowed to do certain programs, they require a certain amount of memory that is not typical to a laptop. So those are the kinds of things that you want to think about, or what are the things that you're utilizing the computer for, because there are differences in the desktop capacity. When I say desktop, I'm talking about a computer that's not mobile like a laptop, as opposed to a laptop computer that's more mobile, but it may not have the memory storage. So those are the two things: internet access and compatible hardware. And everything else is really reliant on you understanding what the needs are of your child.
If I could jump in too a little bit, because my daughter has also been doing a lot of online classes, and so has my son. And I think that having a dedicated quiet space where they can sit and not be constantly interrupted is really important. And also, it's not necessary, but it's very helpful if you have the appropriate mic and headwear, comfortable headwear, because a lot of times if you're online for a long time, earbuds can be uncomfortable when you've had them in for several hours, but having good set of headphones. And also lots of snacks, because with all that learning going on, I think that kids really need a lot of protein and energy to successfully do all the learning that they're in need of. So having snacks nearby, water nearby, and then the appropriate headgear as well. So those are my.
When you say headgear, those what are they called? Noise cancellation kind of headgear, something like that, to keep the distractions down.
Absolutely, definitely. I think, especially for older children, if you have younger children in the house, that can be really distracting, and it makes it so much easier on older children to successfully pay attention and focus.
Yeah. All right, question number 2 from our audience. What are some of the best resources in New York City? She was told that homeschooling in New York is extremely difficult. Can anyone address that? New York City.
I have some contacts for her.
Oh, good.
Not sure how to do that. I tried to put something in the chat. I can't figure that out. So like to copy and paste, I cannot figure that out. But let me find, so Cheryl Carter runs a co-op, and she participates in a co-op there. Jackie Gittins also. So those are my 2 contacts there. and Journey Ben Miola. I have 3 now that I can put her in touch with. These are people in various places in New York City who are homeschooling in co-ops, various types of co-ops. So you don't have to homeschool alone in the city. There are people doing it. And so I don't know how to do, I'm going to figure out how to.
Well, I wonder, why don't you direct people to our email address and you can send it to them from homeschoolingbook@gmail.com.
Okay.
And there's also an organization, it's the state organization of New York, it's Loving Education at Home. It's LEAH, www.leah.org. And they've been around for years, and I think the Carters have probably been a part of LEAH. They used to be representatives to that state organization. So check LEAH out, and they will probably be able to help you with. And I think with New York, you have to be a part of the school district or something like that. You have to use that as an umbrella kind of thing. But if you go to leah.org, you'll be able to find out for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you, panel. Question number 3. What recommendations would you give to parents who are transitioning from public school to homeschool? The springtime school from home, working with our public school, was a difficult transition for us. So she's asking, what recommendations would you give to parents who are transitioning from public school to homeschool?
You might take time to de-school and take time to get out of that mindset of trying to.
Go ahead. Uh-oh, did you freeze?
It's frozen. She was mentioning deschooling, and deschooling is really what was mentioned.
Right. To unschool.
Okay, go ahead. You're back.
Go ahead.
Am I back? Oh, great.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
super. Yeah. I would say a lot of it depends.
Anyone else address the deschooling or unschooling question?
A lot of one big question.
I don't think she realizes that she's frozen and breaking up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
Well, we'll move.
one of my questions would be, is she transitioning exclusively homeschooling, or is it a virtual platform? Because that would be a totally different kind of answer.
Mm-hmm. There's a big difference in the virtual platform.
Well, yes, in that if you're in a virtual platform, you are a part of the school district, and you have the school teachers in front of you. So, and if you have to attend that virtual platform, you have to sign in, show that you're there.
Yes.
And that is just very different from if you totally want to transition from homeschooling. Just like Miss Monica said, you have to de-school. You just have to deprogram yourself, make a paradigm shift, not to try and replicate what you may be used to in a normal school environment. She may be back. Are you back?
Monica, are you back?
Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Well, yes, you know what? You guys said it perfectly. It's a matter of shifting that mindset, and also whether or not you're planning to go back into school. If you're planning to put your child back into a public or private school, that affects your decision on what you're going to teach, probably because I know that a lot of people are telling me that some schools are saying, if you're going to pull your kid out to homeschool, then to get them back in, they need to know X, Y, and Z. So it would be a good idea for you to contact the school and ask them, what are you going to expect from my child if I'm going to re-enroll them? But if you're not, if you're open to homeschooling long-term, it's much more relaxed and it's much more flexible, and you have a lot more
opportunities and choices to make on how you're going to proceed, and take the time to find the right materials for you. You do not have to start homeschooling on a certain day. You can
Uh-oh. Monica, you were on a roll. Well,
when it's comfortable.
Okay. Well, did you finish that thought, Monica? You said you don't have to start homeschooling on a certain day. Okay. Work as if it's comfortable for you. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, there's a fourth question. I don't know if this is our last question, but are there specific ways to set up a homeschooling space and schedule for a child with an IEP for ADHD? The main modification needed deals with executive functioning tools and organization. So is there a way that if you had a student who had an IEP, you could help them organize and set up for effective learning?
It's interesting. I would definitely have to get back with you on that question.
Yeah, that's really specific, I think.
You know, if I might, and I'm the moderator, but if I might, special education is my field.
Yes.
Perhaps I can tackle it just a little bit. But I think some of what you all have said in terms of creating a schedule for the student so that from the start of the day until the end of the teaching session, there's a schedule that is laid out that the student can go by. Some students with an IEP need a little bit more structure. And so with a schedule that helps them to know and anticipate what's coming next, students who are have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, you know, they need to be able to move as well in the classroom. So whether you're homeschooling or you're in the regular classroom, they need to be able to move. It might be even effective if they have something like a little stress ball or something that they can squeeze or manipulate. Those fidget spinners, some people have found to be effective. But you know, there must be some time for them to be able to get up and move and expend some of that energy that's inside of them. Organization. So this is a place where you want to make sure that their materials are in a certain spot so that, again, they can begin to see that there's some continuity that comes to finding the things that they need. Whether it's a binder that's organized for them to find all the things they need. Pencil holders is right there on the desk that's set aside just for them. That executive functioning, that's basically trying to help them to organize their thoughts and put things in order. Okay, I hope that helped.
Yes, it did.
With the use of, Dr. Johnson, would the use of graphic organizers too would help probably, I'm imagining.
Absolutely, graphic organizers, yes, would help you with the schedule and help you. I actually created, and I guess I could submit this, but I actually created a brochure that helped students organize themselves in class and in their lockers and, you know, at home and things like that. So graphic organizers was part of that. Being able to just make sure that, you know, some materials get color coded or whatever it needs to be, just so that that kid can be able to find something easily and readily that they're working on. Also, I think that was, okay, so that was the last question from the audience. So we'd like for, at this time, all of the information that we have gotten, all the resources that we have gotten from these wonderful panel members will be posted on the website, www.nationalblackliberationalliance.org. And so we'd like for you to, if you are an educator who is looking to help us in this regard in terms of homeschooling students, if you are looking to create a co-op or a pod, which is a new trendy word right now, please don't hesitate. There is a call to action for any teachers who are willing to work with us and to help families, especially low-income families who might not have the resources to spend on high-paying tutors and teachers and homeschooling. So if you could share the link that you'll find on our page, there is an application there that those teachers can complete, and that would get them to where they need to be right now, okay, in terms of helping us move this along. So at this point, I would just like to say thank you to our amazing panelists, Monica Oliveira, Dr. Joyce Burgess, Dr. Cheryl Fields-Smith, Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman, and a huge thank you to Asati New, who is kind of behind the scenes, but she is the founder of the National Black Liberation Alliance. So I'd like to thank her for organizing this panel discussion and sponsoring this homeschooling information panel discussion. Thank you so much, as well as your board, for all their contributions. And we would also like to thank our would have been Facebook audience, but Zoom audience now, for tuning in. We hope this program has been helpful to parents and teachers who are in search of answers regarding homeschooling, your scholars. Again, if you are willing and you know educators who might have interest in working with us to assist families, please, please, please share our sign-up form with them, which again can be found on our Facebook page. Also, please take advantage of all the resource information that our panel has provided. There are books there are materials, supplemental, there are websites. Please, there's a lot of information there that will be helpful to you in your quest for helping your students. Please also like and share on our Facebook page, okay? And stay tuned for our upcoming events. I am Dr. Adrian Johnson, and it has been my pleasure moderating for you tonight. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.